Hey guys, welcome back. I'm Winter, and we're here with my very first Legacy of the Void build order guide. Before I start, I want to give a personal shout out to the writers at Team Liquid who went through the effort of compiling a bunch of build orders from the first major Legacy of the Void tournament, DreamHack Winter. And these builds are drawn directly from some of the highest level games you will find. But first off, before we get into it, I want to just do a quick rundown on how to read a build order and how to execute a build order. As you see on the left-hand side of the screen, I have the abridged version of the build order. The numbers are the supply at which you are making things. And the details like your scouting or your stopping probes or starting probes or chronoing things, those are all worked in between building all of these things. They're little details that are important. All the progressions in supply that aren't units or buildings are probes. So at that timing, you want to be making those probes. And also, very importantly, not queuing up probes. Otherwise, you won't be able to hit your timings. But I went into a game not against anyone. I didn't even have an AI player, and I executed this build. It's not perfect, but it's just kind of a visual representation of mostly what it should look like in the early game. I think this build, it is a Protoss versus Zerg build. It is an early adept pressure with the ability to transition into tech. And I think the strongest part of this build is that you are able to put on early pressure to a Zerg player before they get that overwhelming economy, before they get that huge amount of bases that I think a lot of players struggle with. So a lot of Protoss players are like, well, I try to go for tech and I do some damage, but they still have so many units. Or I try to do this early attack, but they still have so many units. And a lot of players don't know how to put on pressure. This build is designed to hit before a Zerg player is done droning, before they're comfortable with their position in the game. As a macro Zerg player, I would say this hits at least a solid minute before you would really like to be dealing with any early attacks. Even if there are stronger attacks you can do later on, a Zerg player, especially with drones and larva production, ramps up exponentially in how many units they can make. So this is going to try to get the damage done early and set me up for a solid maybe a third base and a tech path. We'll get to the tech soon enough. Early on, I'm just making a gateway expand. I'm scouting off of it. Now, this is very important to get the scout out relatively early because if he's going for a pool before a hatch, he has the option to get a solid amount of early Zerglings. Maybe he's going for like a 12 pool or 13 pool. I'd say, especially on a map like this one, the most common build would probably be hatchery first. Maybe even 3 hatchery, 2 hatchery expand, 3 hatch before pool. But every once in a while, you'll see a player going for the early Zerglings. And that's why we're working with the wall in here. I've got the pylon at the front, the cyber core coming up, and now we're at that part of the build where you've stopped making probes. This is important. I actually stopped making probes at the Nexus. 18 supply is what you're looking at. So that way you can afford a cyber core and 2 gas geysers before you make any more probes. If you're trying to make probes during this timing, it kind of defeats the purpose because your cybernetics core will finish. You won't have enough gas for warp gate and not enough minerals for an adept. So that doesn't really help you out. The idea is to get your defenses up solid and early and be able to transition into this attack. And if you're slowing it down by making a couple extra probes, that'll throw everything off. So you got to be careful that you're not just blindly making probes. You got to think about it. I would recommend, honestly, with things like this, go into a game versus you can go play with yourself, all right? I'm sure you'll enjoy it. I enjoy it. As we go into a game without even an AI player here, there's no pressure. You can take your time. You can do it as many times as you want. Because it's all about just refining, shaving those few seconds off, getting it done a little bit quicker. And that is what I'm going to be looking to do with all these build order guides. Remember, this is just a approximate representation. I don't execute the build perfectly, but it's almost on time with everything. Alright, I've got the cyber core finishing up. I'm going to be, well, we're assuming here we saw the most common Zerg build, which was a hatchery first. A hatchery first, when you're probe scouts, a hatchery first starts at about 1 minute, give or take 15 seconds or so, depending on how many drones they like to make before. So if you go in with your probe, when my probe got here like 1 minute and 20 seconds or so, and the hatchery is, say, a third of the way done, that's a hatchery first. If a pool is finished up by the time the probe gets there, you got to be thinking, okay, I got a chronoboost out of zealot here. But we're assuming we see the hatch first, and instead of going for the zealot, I opt for a few more probes quicker, get the adept, and then switching the chronoboost up to the adept, so that way you have enough before warp gate even finishes to put on some extra pressure, because of course you have all that downtime with warp gate as well. Now, after that, I'm getting a mothership core. The mothership core is probably the most, well, the mothership core was actually before the adept here. I failed to point that out, but it is in the build order guide. The mothership core is your most important form of early defense, and also just utility in general. The mothership core, of course, has a ton of different options, but mostly just having the option for photon overcharge means you won't die to just a bunch of random things. Let's put it that way. Now, I'm just going to spend a quick second. This is not specific to the build, but pylon placements, in PvZ especially. In PvZ, I like to wall off personally. There are some players who don't, but in this scenario, I think walling off, especially on a map like this, is very solid. I have another pylon in the back here. This is partly for if he goes for overlord drop, which is relatively common with some early Zerglings. I have that basic defense. That's the same reason I have a pylon over here. I've dealt with too many sets of overlord drops early on to not have these pylons. And also, these are pretty good for hiding your tech maybe later on, or if you're going for a cheeky build. This isn't specific to this build in front of us. Now, I'm adding on my gateways as well. If I was on a different map where the second base had a different wall-in that was a little bit more open as opposed to having just the single ramp, say Prion Terraces, which is a map that a lot of players struggle in PvZ, I'm going to be adding these gateways on at the wall-in. So that allows me to kind of choke off my second expansion, make it a lot harder for those early mid-game timings to put on pressure before I'm ready to put on pressure myself. From here, we're still just looking to pump out the adepts. I don't actually end up getting quite enough adepts here. I think I queued up a few too many probes during this. But you should be looking to have up to 4 adepts coming out of this first gateway before it finishes up. And now, for probably the most important part of the game, before actually putting on this pressure, is the tech choice. Now, there's no right option here, unless you've already scouted and somehow got a lot of information. Like, if he's going for roaches, you want a robo, for example. But there are a few other things you're going to see that early on that are going to give you such a black and white option. I'm just going to go through. This is drawn almost directly from Team Liquid. I'm going to describe each tech option you have and the benefits and drawbacks, and it's up to you. I personally usually choose the robo because I find it the safest and most stable option, but there are definitely pros and cons to all of them. With the robo, you have the ability to deal with those large masses of roach hydra, or maybe even lurkers coming up a little bit later on, because you're aiming to get disruptors out. And of course, you can get a warp prism and observers and all the like, and you can do a lot of stuff with those things. The other options are the Twilight Council, which can transition either into Blink, which is the more standard option, it's the more macro-oriented option. It gives you a more solid mid-game that you can work off of, because you have a lot of units that are very cost-effective, and him attacking in is just going to be very difficult if you're able to finish up Blink. And Blink is something, like, if you're going to play a longer game, you're eventually going to get Blink. That is kind of just a basic thing. The other option is a Dark Shrine. Now, what I'm going to be doing with this build, we're going to be doing a heavy Adept pressure. And why does that maybe transition into a Dark Shrine? Well, when you're doing an Adept pressure like this, it's very likely you're going to kill at least some drones. You're going to force out units, and in that situation where you've both killed his economy and forced him into units, a lot of the time, players won't be focusing on safety, but on redroning or reestablishing their economy. And a lot of players, after taking a little bit of early damage, will just say, okay, there's your attack. They won't be making spore crawlers. They probably won't be making too many overseers as well. There's a good chance you can, especially if you do moderate damage, that he will not be prepared for DTs. But DTs, of course, require the element of surprise. If he sees them, if he gets an overseer or something in time, you got to be a little bit careful. But of course, the Dark Shrine can be, I'd say, out of all of these, is a game-winning option. If you really just want to go for that win after doing the early pressure, well then you got your Dark Shrine. I'm sure you've done it before. I'm sure you'll do it again. But the last option is the Stargate. The Stargate is a bit in between because the weakness of the Stargate is just ground units in general, especially early on. If you're going for oracles or maybe adding on phoenixes, you're not going to have very much defense on the ground. You'll have a lot of space control, a lot of map control with those Stargate units, but it takes a while compared to a robo or a twilight to actually get that basic ground defense. So if you like having control of the situation, you're comfortable with your ground defense, maybe good with force fields or on controlling your units or setting up your buildings correctly, then a Stargate is a safe option. It's also, importantly, very good against Mutalisks, as Mutalisks are a constant plague for a lot of Protoss players. I know, especially at the lower levels, people struggle in dealing with those early mutas running you around. You have nothing to respond to them. Phoenixes are the only reliable way to respond to Mutalisks. So if you are... Oh, also if you get the scout with the early adepts that I'm going to be moving out with here in a moment, you can transition to the Stargate as well. Like you say you see a lair and you see a spire starting when you come in with the adepts, well, there you go. Your choice is pretty much made for you. But the tech choice is your choice. I'm just showing you how to get to a safe position. Taking it from there is not something a build order guide is going to show you. Maybe you'll watch some games of players and how they play it out. But the build order kind of ends right around when I'm starting to warp in these adepts. You see, 4 minutes is about the time you should be aiming for. I'm a little bit late on it. Not perfect execution, but I'm able to get some more adepts. I'm going to be moving out. Now, the last part of this guide is what I want to do with these adepts. The idea here is to hit before a Zerg player is really prepared for such an attack. I'm shading across the map. I have a proxy pylon to maybe add a few more on, though it's... Maybe you don't want to add them on. Maybe you want to take a third base behind. Pretty much what you're doing with these adepts is as much damage as possible while buying time to either take a third base or tech up to a potentially game... Like, if you're going to stay on 2 base, you have to find some game-ending tech, because more than likely a Zerg player is going to be on 3 bases right now. So, I'm moving in with the adepts. I'm going to say maybe try to do some damage here. The shades will help you scout whether or not you want to attack the front or you want to try to go behind. If you see a bunch of roaches, obviously, you might not even want to attack at all. Well, you want to just go for the economic damage. If it's the Zerglings, maybe you just want to fight the Zerglings and go for the drones. And by the time he gets more Zerglings out, you'll be spread out between all the bases. Now, it's very important during this, while you're focusing on the attack, make sure you have your money spent and you're doing what you want to do at home. I like to take a third base behind doing any early pressure as Protoss. So I would opt for a third base and just be getting an observer out and maybe going for a robo bay when I have the money here while I'm doing this attack. It's important to have that transition because his attention should be almost 100% focused on this if you put it on time, especially if he's going for a 3-base build. So if you can put maybe 75% of your attention into the attack and 25% into your build at home, that's giving you a decent chunk of time where you're progressing your tech and your build and all your infrastructure, while he is not. And I'm sure you've come under early pressure by things like this before. You've been attacked from several angles. You know you're not transitioning during that most of the time. Even I have a lot of trouble. Like, if I'm getting attacked directly by something I'm maybe not even prepared for, because this attack is designed to hit before you're really prepared for it, your only priority is defending. So take that opportunity, get an advantage off of that. Now, there are a lot of adaptations of this build, but the goal remains the same. You want to slow down the Zerg economy while having the option, the versatility, the utility to move into tech and additional bases behind it. You can defend early on with the gateway expand, and you have the nexus behind to have the economy to transition into pretty much whatever you want. Use it. Tell me what you think of the build. Once again, thank you to Team Liquid and the writers there for detailing. I'm only putting together this video guide to maybe explain it a little bit more visually. The link will be below directly to the article with this build and more, and also the build order itself as well. But hopefully you guys enjoyed. This is my first guide of this type, especially for Legacy of the Void. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I would really appreciate feedback, comments, everything that could help me out or encourage me even to make more of these videos. But hopefully that helps you guys out, especially you higher level Protoss players. Even lower level Protoss players, I think, can take away a lot from this. But good luck, have fun, and happy Starcrafting. Did it.